guys, welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new. My name is Heather. I'm a homeschooling mom of 3 kids, and today I'm going to be sharing all about the books that I've read in February. So let's get started. Okay guys, I read quite a few books in February. I'm really excited to share them with you. There were not nearly as many 5-star reads this month as there were in January. You're going to have to excuse my voice. We have been sick. We were sick pretty much all of our homeschool break last week, and that's unfortunate because I did not get all of the goal things done that I wanted to get done. But I did do quite a bit of reading because there wasn't really much else I could do. So I'm going to share the books with you. I think that the problem with my reading in February was I was in a reading slump because I had read so much Sarah J. Maas over the past 6 weeks or so. And even before that with Iron Flame, because I reread Fourth Wing and then I read Iron Flame when it came out in November last year. And so I've been kind of in a bit of a reading slump, and that will be reflected in the books that I chose and so many 3-star reads. Pretty much with my ratings, I don't think I've ever explained this, with my ratings, if it's not at least a 3-star read for me, I almost always DNF it because there are way too many books to read for me to try to read something that I don't enjoy. I used to be a person that would read through any book that I started, but probably, I think it was after college. Well, after college, I stopped reading, I think, for about 2 years, except for Harry Potter. And I didn't really get back into reading for quite a while because I was so burnt out from all of the academic reading of college. But I just do not keep reading books. I hated it in high school and college when a book really just did not jive with me. If I just didn't enjoy a book, I didn't want to keep reading it because I felt like it was a waste of time. I felt like there was probably another book that would either teach me the same thing in a way that would make sense for me and that I would enjoy, or it was just not the book for me. So, and I kind of have that view with my kids for their school as well. I do often let them skip books or choose different books if they want something different. That does not bother me because my goal really is a love of reading, and I think that there's a lot of ways that you can go about that. Obviously, there are books that they do have to read, but I don't make them read every single book if they hate every single book. Anyways, so far this month, because there are still a couple of days left in February, it's possible that I could finish a book, although I don't have any books that I'm really reading right now. I'm in a new reading slump, I guess. But I've read 18 books. 8 were physical books, 7 were ebooks, and 3 were audiobooks. 12 were fiction, and 6 were nonfiction. I'm sharing these in order of how I've read them for the most part. The first book was The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning by Margareta Magnusson, and I only gave that 2 stars. And like I just said, typically if a book is not starting out at least at a 3-star read, I will not finish it. But this book was super short. I think it was only like 100 pages. And I don't think that any of the content was really bad. It was just not a book for me. I much prefer the Marie Kondo book, even though since she has written that book, she's had children and she says that she does not live that way anymore. I was just looking for something that would be encouraging for me for decluttering for the month of February because I had a ton of decluttering projects on my tending list for February. This book, I think maybe it might have been generational. The way that she talked about some things just rubbed me the wrong way. It wasn't bad information, but it just wasn't a great book for me. The next book that I read was House of Flame and Shadow, which is the 3rd book in the Crescent City series. I was so excited for this book to come out. I've been, reading all of Sarah J. Maas leading up to this book coming out so that I could be ready, and I did really enjoy this book. I know that there are a lot of people that didn't like it. They didn't like all the different points of views and some of the content in it they didn't enjoy. I think that the multiple POVs were a little challenging to read through at some points, but it wasn't too jarring to me, and I kind of like to know all of the things that are going on. I really like that. I like to know everything that's going on in a book. I did not realize that she hasn't been contracted for anything after book 3 in this series, and so I don't wanna get too spoilery, but I might, so you may wanna skip ahead to the next book if you haven't read this. I go into a lot of my reading completely blind. I don't want to read reviews or see theories or anything so that I can make up my own opinion as I'm reading. And so when I was getting towards the end of this book, I was waiting for something really like a cliffhanger to happen. I just was expecting that, and I did not expect it to be wrapped up so nicely as it was. I appreciate how it was ended, how the book ended. I think that it was a really good ending to the book, but I'm definitely going to have to go back and read it because I think that probably the last 250 pages, I was waiting for something, and so I wasn't really in the story. I was enjoying the story, but I was anticipating something else happening. And so when that didn't happen, I was like, oh. But I think that this world that Sarah J. Maas has built is amazing. I really like this book. I know that everybody says that they love the ACOTAR series so much. I've read the first 3 ACOTAR books, and I thought that they were good. They weren't my favorite. They're not like my Roman Empire, as a lot of Sarah J. Maas readers would say. I really, really love Throne of Glass a lot more. And I think that might be because I'm more into the fantasy side of her writing. But I definitely enjoy the Crescent City series and recommend it. I gave that 5 stars. The next book that I read was Heat of the Everflame by Penn Cole. And this is the 3rd book in the Kindred's Curse series. After I read Fourth Wing last year, I was in a reading slump. I think I read it for the first time in the summer. I waited and waited and waited because I knew that the second book was going to be coming out in the fall, and I didn't want to read it when the first book came out because I don't like reading incomplete series. I really struggle with that. So I saw this Kindred's Curse series on Instagram, and I tried it, and I loved the first 2 books. The first 2 books were so good, and I flew through them. The 3rd book came out, and I started reading it, and I was reading and reading and reading and reading, and this book I think is over 1,000 pages, and I was reading it on Kindle, and I couldn't understand why had been reading so long, and I was only at like 40 to 50% of the book. It is a good book. Towards the end, like the last half of the book, I enjoyed, but there were some new characters that just didn't work for me, and some of the decisions were really frustrating to me that the female main character was making, and even the male main character were making. So I originally gave this 4 stars, but the more that I thought about it, I really only think it was a 3-star read for me. I will read the next book because I think it's just a 4-book, I think it's a 4-book series, crossing my fingers, and I want to know what happens with all of the characters, but I think it was a little long. I think some of the character choices the author made for this book were just misses for me. Yeah. So then the next book that I read was How to Ruin Your Life by 30. This was a book that's part of Emma's Bible curriculum for level 300 through Sunlight. I do some books as read-alouds with her, even in high school, just because there's a lot of reading. I think she has 22 history books and 24 English books for this year for just those 2 subjects, and so it's extensive, and so I do read some of them. This is part of the Bible curriculum, which we don't typically follow that through the instructor's guides. I will piece some of the resources together, and we will go through them periodically depending on how our year is going. And so this book I did give 4 stars. It was good. I think that some of the information was much more applicable to kids in their 20s and not kids, to people in their 20s and not necessarily high schoolers. There were a lot of relationship discussions, which Emma really enjoyed, and I think that she enjoyed the book. It's a very short book, but we had a ton of conversation come out of this book and discussion, so I thought it was a pretty good book. Not my favorite. Some of the chapters were a little wordy. Some of them, it kind of felt like he was talking down to you a little bit in some of the areas, but for the most part, I really did like that book. The next book that I finished was A History of Us, book 7. This is for Jack's history. curriculum this year, and we had been reading America, the Last Best Hope as his spine in the fall term and did not like it. It was way too dry for us. So I switched back to the Joy Hakeem books, which I used when Emma did US history for her freshman year a couple of years ago. And we enjoyed it. It's all about Reconstruction, and it was a good book. I like all of the different discussions that we have. I like all of the little side paths that we go on. I know that not everybody likes the Joy Hakeem A History of Us series, but I think that it's really great. Obviously, any history is going to be biased, and you just kind of have to go in knowing that. But I like that it's written by one person instead of like a textbook style written by a committee. I think that it just it flows better that way. And obviously there's a lot of discussion questions and such in the instructor's guides. I have the old instructor's guides for level 100, so it's easy for me to pick up on the things that I need to with this book series. I'm trying to think if there is another curriculum company that uses A History of Us, but I can't. I feel like maybe Build Your Library uses some of her books, but I'm not sure. The next book that I read was Prince of Never by Juno Hart. This was just a 3-star read for me. This is when I was trying to find something to read after finishing up House of Flame and Shadow, and I liked it okay. It's about a human girl who has a lovely voice, and she is fated to a fae prince, and it was just okay. It was just okay. I think that there are maybe 4 books in this series, and I think that it was standalone, but it was just okay for me. Then I read A Court of Thorns and Roses again, and I gave that 4 stars. I started it in January in preparation for reading House of Flame and Shadow, but then I was getting towards the end of January, and I realized that I still wanted to read House of Sky and Breath before House of Flame and Shadow came out, and I was running out of time, and so I put away ACOTAR and realized I was not going to get through it. So I finished that in February, gave it 4 stars. I started the next book, and I'm like 25% in, and I'm just not interested in reading it. I know everybody loves those books. I know I just said that too, but I think that it's just not as exciting for me. But I wanted to pull out some interesting things that kind of connect all of the books together. And actually, one thing about House of Flame and Shadow that I thought was interesting, this is probably spoilery as well, I really despise Nesta as a character in ACOTAR, but in House of Flame and Shadow, I liked her much more. I never read her book. I don't think that her as a character, I just don't like her as a character. I know some people love her, I just don't, so I don't really care about her backstory and stuff or what she's doing, but I liked her much more in House of Flame and Shadow, not even in her actual series. So, all right. The next book that I read was The Wolf in the Watchtower by Sue Wilder, and I did give this one 4 stars. It is about a girl who is it's paranormal, it's part of a werewolf pack, but her mother takes her away when she's young because her mother and she do not have a wolf, I guess. It's the first book in a series. It might just be a duet, I'm not sure. I did like it. I'm interested to see what the next book is. The next book just came out last week. I haven't had a chance to start it yet, but I am interested in continuing with that series. It was good. I really liked the characters. I liked the mystery. It'll be interesting to see what happens next. The next book that I read was The Winter of Our Disconnect, and I only gave that one 3 stars, which really surprised me because when I read this book originally, I think it came out in 2010, and I read it 2010, 2011. I loved it and gave it 5 stars. So I don't know if it's because the book is definitely dated now, talking about like MySpace and talking about early Facebook and talking about direct messaging or IMs, and I don't know if that was the struggle or if it was how it was written or if it's just the life stage that I'm in now with the kids, the ages my kids are at this point, or if it's just, too far into the future. 14 years ago, this book was written, I guess. I don't know what it was exactly, but I didn't enjoy it as much this time. I did finish it because I was interested to see where it would go. I didn't remember a lot from the book, but I do remember loving it the first time and it just being okay this time, which was kind of a bummer because I'd been looking forward to reading this. And there is another one that I constantly am talking about reading, but I always forget the title. It's What Falls from the Sky by Esther Emery, and I'm really interested to see how that book will translate because, again, when I first read that book, I gave it 5 stars, so I'm interested to see if I still really love it as much as I did then. I haven't read that yet. The next book that I read was A Court This Cruel and Lovely by Stacia Stark. I think that's how you pronounce her name. It could be Stacia, I'm not sure. And I only gave it 3 stars. I read this because everybody said, oh, this is a great book to read after the third Crescent City book. It was only okay. I did end up reading the second book as well. I read it on audio, and then I did read the second book, A Kingdom This Cursed and Empty, because I was kind of interested to see what happened. I only gave that one 3 stars as well. I don't think I'm going to continue on with the series. It was not my favorite. It was just okay. The next book that I read was Digital Madness, and I gave that 4 stars. I thought that it was a really, really interesting book. There was a ton of research in it, and I love research-based books about the psychology behind social media and what it is doing to us and to our kids and all of that kind of information. I thought it was a really fascinating book. I definitely recommend it. I've been on this tech journey over the past couple of months. It's been a lot of fun for me exploring technology, how we use technology, how we use tech in our home, how I use it in my business, all of that, and just figuring out what the best way for me and my family to use technology is. It's been interesting, but I definitely recommend it. It came out in 2021, so there's definitely some stuff about COVID and everything in it, so really, really good book. The next book that I read is The Latte Factor by David Bach, and this is a finance book, kind of telling the story of a girl who really loves this picture in a coffee shop, and she wants to buy it. It's $1,200 and she can't afford that on her salary or whatnot, and her discussions with the owner of a coffee shop and how she is richer than she thinks and how much she spends each day like on her latte and how much that would grow over time if she invested. I liked it. It was a 4-star read for me. I think that some of these books, some of the finance books, I understand what they're saying, and I think that had I been able to make different choices when I was in my 20s, maybe it would be different. But you know, when my husband and I got married, we had so much student loan debt. There was so much student loan debt. We just weren't able to make some of the choices. But looking back, we also made a lot of frivolous choices, and I think that, you know, some of that just comes with, you know, you live and you learn. And so I do think it was a good book. It's not as applicable to me in my 40s as it would be to somebody in their 20s. The next book that I read was Fourth Wing, and this was the dramatization that came out in January, February. I think it came out recently. And I love Fourth Wing as the book, and I've read it a few times now. But the dramatization, I only gave 4 stars. I did not like some of the voices. I never used to read audiobooks, ever. I would never read audiobooks because I have such a problem with some narrators. And while I think that it was good overall, the dramatization, it just wasn't my favorite. And maybe it's just because I enjoy reading so much. I don't want to hear, I just think some of the casting choices for some of the voices didn't work for me. I'll leave it at that. On Goodreads, this comes up as 2 books because it was 2 parts, but I only put 1 book on my list. The next book that I read was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, and I gave this 5 stars. It was so good. It was so good. It is about a girl whose aunt recently passed away and left her apartment in New York City, and the apartment is magical and will at random send the person back 7 years into the same apartment. And it was this girl's journey. There was a lot of grief. There I believe should have been a trigger warning. It is very spoilery to have this as a trigger warning, but I'm going to give it in case anybody else wants it, and that is suicide. I think that suicide should always have a trigger warning. Um, that's just my personal preference. So it was a really good book, and this is the first book that I've read by this author. I think this book maybe just came out either last year or the year before, recently. And so she has another book called The Dead Romantics, which sounded really interesting. So I requested that from the library. I'm really looking forward to reading it because I've heard that people like that book more than this book. So we'll see. And then the last book that I read was Bride by Hazelwood, which just came out this month as well. And I also gave that 5 stars. This was paranormal. Hazelwood usually writes contemporary. I've never read any of her books. I think partly because they're not on Kindle Unlimited. And so I either have to purchase them or get them from the library, and they're often, I often have to request them from the library. Also, the premise of her other books, they're much more STEM related, I think. They've never sounded all that interesting to me, but Bride was amazing. I thought it was so, so good. I love paranormal anyways. So I might give some of her other books a try just because I really enjoyed the writing and the pacing and the characters I thought were really good. So I think that I could definitely enjoy some of her other books as well. So I might look into that. But that is the end of my reading wrap up for February. It is possible that I will read another book, like I said earlier in the video. I do have this book that I got from the library this past weekend, Set Boundaries, Find Peace. Nonfiction, obviously, which I haven't started yet, but I might start. And I do have another book at the library to pick up, not The Dead Romantics. I'm kind of waiting to see, because that one I think is in transit. This is another nonfiction, business related book. But it's been a good reading month. I think that I was a little bummed because a lot of my fiction reading was only 3-star this month, and it's okay when that happens, but it puts me in a reading slump, and I just want to find a book that I love. So I was really happy to find The 7-Year Slip and Bride this past weekend, which I read. I read The 7-Year Slip in one day, and then I read Bride in one day, and they were both really good. And I was sick in bed. That's why I was able to read them completely through in one day each. But definitely recommend those. So that is my February wrap up. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have questions about any of the books that I talked about, definitely let me know in the comments. I do have lots of book talk over in my Patreon community, so if you want to come check that out, I will leave a link in the description box for you. All of the books can also be found in the description box. Thank you again so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks, guys. Bye.